The Rune of Berkana. Cataclysm. The armored boar was still piecing together his own fragmented memories. The magic that these men were alluding towards, they knew well, yet they spoke nothing of it. They let the tale of their experiences speak for themselves. By the skills of the barmaid, Fingar and the rest had their cups filled once again.
Here's your other round.
He leaned on the table and asked Reed.
When was the first time you saw this, Metal Horse?
Gania barked out.
Oh, great. We have to hear this one again.
Duelhoff smirked and added.
The Red Bear took a shit in the woods and made the horse clean it up. Those are the basic details.
Fingar laughed, waiting for the Red Bear's response. Elric raised his goblet a bit.
He does deserve to know.
Then eyeing Reed.
Try not to take all night.
Reed Bjornoff was awoken by his daughter, Fela.
Papa, wake up.
He answered to his daughter with an attitude, but then picked her up and kissed her before he got out of his cot.
Okay, I'm getting up. What do you want now?
Fela responded to him in her cute little voice.
I want to go play, but Mom said I have to wait for you to play with me.
Reed stretched his arms and twisted his back, as per his usual morning routine. He then began putting on his clothes and tying up his boots.
Is there anywhere you'd like to go adventuring today, my little Valkyrie?
He said to her with a smile as he held her hand and headed out the door. His daughter thought for a bit, and then told him.
Let's go to the wood's edge.
They continued through the village called Elfheim, giving greetings to those he saw on their way to his daughter's favorite play area. The town they resided in was respectable, and many travelers would find themselves at its grand hall. Elfheim was mostly known for its farmlands, and the inhabitants were quite crafty when it came to herbal medicines and tinctures. It was close to harvesting season now, and as a farmer, Reed was rather excited about how well his crops had been growing. He hoped to reap enough food to sell some at the markets in other villages like Ayamar and Stalharas. This could be the year he upgraded his farm into a ranch and got livestock to breed and butcher. He wanted to make a great estate for his family, for he thought they deserved nothing less from him.
So, what will we be fighting out in these woods this time?
Her father said while they began their march towards the forest. Fela was quick to answer.
How about you fight a big army and save me from them?
Reed chuckled as he replied.
Fela, isn't that what we do every time?
She gained a serious face as she thought about it, but then came up with an answer.
But this time you have to rescue me first so I can fight the army with you.
He nodded his head with a smile on his face, then spoke again to her.
Do you want to be a warrior like your father?
She tilted her eyebrows with an insulting expression.
No, I want to be a warrior like Mama.
He laughed out loud as they got to the proper spot for the pretend battle.
Oh, okay.
While they were playing, he always had to address her as Valkyrie Fela, and she would only call him my hero. They picked up sticks and fought invisible foes, sometimes hitting the trees to make clicking sounds for their fantastic war. At the end, Reed pretended to be her last enemy, and let her strike him across the chest a few times. He grabbed a stick and lodged it under his armpit, to make it look as though he had been stabbed.
You got me!
Laying on his back, pretending to be dead, she put a foot on his chest and exclaimed,
I am Freya Bjornoff, and I have defeated you all.
Reed got up and put his daughter on his shoulders as they began walking back towards their town. They acted like there was a celebration of townspeople thanking Fela for her bravery in the recent mock battle. The two had smiles from ear to ear as they headed into the village. They spotted Fela's mother, Morgana, outside their home waiting on them. Approaching his wife, Reed took his daughter off his shoulders and let her run to her mother. His wife greeted them.
How was your adventure today?
Fela responded first.
It was great. I fought with Papa, then I won the battle all on my own.
Reed put his arm around his wife's waist and kissed her gently on the lips. They locked eyes for a brief moment, then smiled to each other as he gave his answer to the question.
Fela wants to be a shield maiden like her mother. Did you know that?
Morgana threw her head around to look down at their daughter, letting her long brunette hair twist around her neck.
You'd be the greatest warrior ever to live, my dear. It sounds like you're already besting your father in battles.
Reed rolled his eyes to the comment as Morgana winked at him and pinched his buttocks.
Ooh.
So did you and Elric have fun last night?
His wife said to him as if he was in trouble. Reed looked her body up and down, admiring his lover's beauty, but not quite answering the question. She asked again with some sass in her voice.
I said, did you and Elric have fun drinking at Hallstein's last night?
Reed gave her a look with the best innocent face he could make, then answered.
I don't know what you mean, my love. I fell asleep next to you last night.
His answer was convincing, but his wife was no fool.
You wouldn't know what I mean, as you were probably too drunk to remember waking me up and saying you wanted to make another child,
she said to him while peering through the top of her eyes. Reed quickly responded.
And you rejected your husband's drunken wishes? Maybe you're not the woman I thought I married.
He smiled wildly as she scoffed at his reply. She leaned in closer to him, letting her breast touch his arm, then whispered.
You really must not remember last night then, because I didn't say no. I was hoping we could try again tonight.
His face brightened up as she began to walk towards their home, leading Fela to the door. The three of them went inside where supper was almost ready. Morgana had been out at the local market and brought back fresh fish and bread for them. She also made Reed's favorite vegetable soup, using ingredients from their own garden.
Smells delicious, my dear. Did they like any of our crops you brought to them?
Reed asked to Morgana while slurping a taste of the soup. She responded excitedly.
They took a trade for the fish and bread instantly, and were asking when we'd have more for them. I think this harvest could be the one you've been waiting for.
Her words were like music to his ears, and he couldn't help but hug and kiss his two favorite ladies to the good news.
That is exactly what I wanted to hear,
he said to his wife as he wrapped his arms around her from behind.
I could have never done this without you.
Morgana grinned as her husband held her close. The Bjornoff family sat around the table and ate their supper, laughing and enjoying each other's company. After their meal was eaten and their bellies full, the couple put their beautiful daughter to sleep. She wanted to hear her favorite bedtime story first, though, so Reed told her about when Thor's hammer was stolen by the giants. She would always laugh at the part where Thor dressed like Freya in order to trick the giant that stole his hammer. The giant thought he was marrying Freya, but as Mjolnir was delivered during the wedding, Thor revealed himself and struck the giant down in one magnificent blow. Fela would fall asleep after Reed finished his entertaining tale about the god of thunder. The happy couple started to clean up the mess from supper, as Morgana asked.
If we had never met, who do you think you would have married?
Her husband looked a bit puzzled to the question. He responded.
That seems like a trap.
He laughed at his own joke, but she reassured him.
I'm honestly curious, Reed. Don't laugh at it. Was there ever anyone else you desired before me?
Reed took a few moments to think on it. He sat down and brought her onto his lap as he stared into her eyes again. Then he told her,
There was never a woman I loved before you. If we had never met, then I suppose I would still be wandering around this earth, looking for you.
His words melted her heart, and she said with a soothing tone,
I love you.
Reed said it back while holding her body in his arms.
I love you too.
Then she brought her hand down to her cleavage and opened up her blouse.
Now, about that other child.
He picked her up without hesitation and carried her to their bed. They worshipped each other's bodies for the night, letting giggles and laughs turn into moans and groans. They fell asleep holding each other naked, their bodies and souls connected as one. The night before, as Reed and Elric were in the grand hall, they overheard rumors about a witch in the woods. The sorceress was supposedly casting spells to manipulate the minds of animals, making them go rabid and bloodthirsty. There hadn't been any attacks on the village from wild animals in many moons, though, so they both wrote it off as rubbish stories to keep children from wandering too far from their homes. Regrettably, the rumors were true. As Reed and his wife laid fast asleep in their bed, they were awoken by a loud growling and roars outside of their home. A shrieking scream came over top of their ears. Reed jumped to attention and gathered his battle gear. Picking up his axe, he told Morgana,
Keep Fela safe and stay inside.
He then stepped out the door, into the thick fog that was looming in the night air. Suddenly, from behind him, he heard the beastly roar that had awoken him. He turned around, his axe in hand, to see a bear standing upright. Its teeth were stained red, and blood dripped from its foaming mouth. This was no longer an animal to Reed. This was the magical work of Hel and Loki. a vile beast from the underrealm. Bjornoff made a stand for himself and attempted to attack the bear. He swung at its head, but the bear caught his axe in its teeth and bit down on the blade, shattering it into bits and pieces. The warrior ducked under an attack from the beast and circled around it. He grabbed his knife from his boot and tried to puncture the bear's hide, but it only bent the tip of his dagger. Morgana had heard the commotion and had bounded to the door to help her husband. Reed turned to shout at her to go back inside, but as he did so, the bear brought its massive paw across his arm and flung him into the woodshed. The small lumber shack collapsed on impact and covered Reed with its rubble. He was knocked unconscious as the bear continued its rampage on Elfheim throughout the night. Elric thrice had found his friend Reed after the bear's rampage. He brought him back to his place and let him rest up there. When Reed finally woke up, he was confused as to why he was in Elric's hut.
Oh, what happened last night? Were we attacked, or did we wear out our welcome again at Halstein's Tavern?
Bjornoff asked Elric while rubbing his head. Elric walked towards Reed and sat down beside him.
A bear attacked the town last night. You tried to fight it. But that thing, it couldn't be harmed by any of our weapons.
Concerned about his family, Reed asked.
Where is my daughter? Where is Morgana? Tell me they're okay, Elric.
Thrice couldn't look at his friend as he answered him.
He got them, little brother. They are with the gods and goddesses now.
Bjornoff descended into a seething abyss of anger and miserable despair when he heard Elric's words. Tears began to cascade down his heartbroken face.
No!
Reed yelled back at his friend.
You bastard! You saved me, but you let them die?
He got up and pushed Elric over, continuing his rage of misplaced hate towards him.
We were going to have another child together. They were everything I had. I should bring Ragnarok down upon you.
The angry Norseman shouted at him, but Elric calmly stood up and spoke back.
Steady yourself. Brothers do not fight brothers.
Thrice lifted his hands up and opened them, showing that he was not going to retaliate any attacks. Elric continued talking.
They were gone by the time I got to you. I would have traded places with either of them if I could. Reed, I know what they meant to you.
Bjornoff sank to his knees and mourned his dead wife and child. He was a wreck of emotions, but his longtime friend tried to console him.
I got everything we need to hunt this wretched witch. I know it won't bring them back, but we can avenge them.
Reed spoke back to him with a downcast face.
I want to boil her blood and drink mead from her skull. Where is this damn crone?
His friend responded.
No one is sure, but we believe she's hiding deep in the northern woods.
The despondent man gathered himself and stood back up, putting his hand on Elric's shoulder.
Thank you, old friend. Listen, I'm sorry about what I said.
Thrice only nodded, then began packing up what they would need on their trek through the dense forest. He handed Reed a rucksack and he tossed it over his shoulder, along with a weathered hatchet for a weapon that he strapped to his hip. Bjornoff remarked,
It's a bit small, but I'll make it work. You know, I've been thinking. If last night wasn't a dream, then that beast destroyed my battle axe with its teeth. What kind of magic are we dealing with here, Elric?
Elric responded the best he could.
It seems to be very powerful, but I've not heard of anything like it. We'll need to stay sharp and pray the Norns are on our side.
Thrice led the way, and intentionally did not go by Reed's home. He didn't need to see the condition it was in, nor any of the bloodstains that lined the walls. It felt like a ghost town as they walked through Elfheim. Most people were hiding inside their homes, scared that the bear might attack again. The two men continued their pace, heading out of their homeland. They only stopped for a moment at 2 mounds of dirt beyond the house. Bjornoff whispered a silent prayer, and then they were headed north.
Rest easy, my loves.
Reed asked another question.
Has the bear been tracked? Do we even know where it is?
Elric answered.
We think it ran into a cave northeast of here. Hopefully when we kill this witch, the hex on that bear will die with her.
The grieving father just shook his head with understanding. In his mind, he was trying to comprehend how the bear was unable to be hurt by anything. It had to have a weakness in some way, but the two men did not have a clue as to what that could possibly be. Getting into the forest,
They both stayed as silent as possible. Using eye gestures and hand signals, they carved their own path through the woods. The duel hadn't spotted anything out of the ordinary. Typical woodland creatures frolicked, and birds were heard whistling on branches. After a few hours had passed, they came upon a willow tree that sat close to a stream. The animals in the forest would likely use this as their drinking source. The two unloaded their gear by the tree and began refilling their water skins. Something strange came over Reed at that moment, a tingling down his spine and inaudible words humming in the air. He got Elric's attention, and they started inspecting the tree their gear was propped up against. Reed chipped at it with his weapon, but bark flicked off like normal. The humming grew after he did this, though, so he motioned for Thrice to light a torch. As the sparks turned into flames, the noises Reed heard finally broke through as words calling out to them.
Stop! Stop!
An ominous voice pleaded.
Stop what you're doing!
A disembodied spectral tone called out to them. A beautiful, young, voluptuous woman suddenly materialized before their bewildered eyes.
Do not harm it! Please do not harm it!
She said while gliding towards them. The woman was half-dressed and showing little modesty. She wore leafy vines that ran around and in between her breasts, finally caressing her nipples. Her earthly outfit swirled about her pelvic region and descended down a single leg. Clearly this was the witch that they had sought out to destroy, but it would have made it easier on the men if she had been an old crone, like they anticipated.
Aye! What's your name, witch whore?
Reed spouted out, his weapon raised. She took several steps back and cautiously replied.
I am Televok. Please, by the gods, do not harm that willow tree.
Bjornoff let out a shout.
I'll burn you alive tied to it, and you can die with that fucking tree.
The bear, it was malpractice. I'm sure of it. Something or someone altered my spell. I would never have done that intentionally.
She pleaded as the men began to approach her. Seeing them draw near, she exclaimed,
Please, listen to my words. I do not believe it was my magic. Something interfered.
Elric put out an arm across Reed's chest and spoke.
You will have to convince both of us, not only myself, but him as well, if you want to stay alive.
Reed was fuming inside, thinking of how he would decapitate her and wear her skin as a trophy. After a moment he steadied himself, knowing that Thrice was probably hatching some sort of plan.
This willow is very good fortune.
Televok started her defense.
I was trying to manipulate its power. I wanted animals to have the same wisdom that we humans have. I wanted them to evolve for the good of man.
Reed gripped the handle of his weapon tighter as Elric listened intently.
Instead, they became angry and bloodthirsty creatures when I cast my spells upon them.
She finished with a confused expression.
That, my dear lady, should be left up to the gods.
Elric pronounced as he thrusted his spear just short of her throat.
You have not convinced me that you are worth sparing, especially after admitting your own guilt in the matter.
He let the tip of his spear sway closer to her skin.
We cannot trust you, nor does Elfaheim need the likes of a clumsy witch.
The witch pricked her finger on the spear's end and quickly cut herself. As blood dripped from her flesh and fell to the earth, she let out a moan. It sounded erotic, like she might have just had a climax of sexual excitement right there in front of them.
You do need my help.
She slyly smiled.
Elric, isn't it? So that must make you Reed. I didn't expect this, but my blood and your spear just had an enlightening connection. I saw your unfortunate past and a glimpse at the possible future.
The witch said with confidence.
I'll never need your damned help. That bear killed everything I ever loved.
Reed quickly responded.
If you want to end the nightmare, and if Elric wants to avenge his parents, then you will want my help.
Televok's words unraveled like magical silk. The two men were taken back, as no one dare spoke of Elric's parents. It was a bad omen to even mention them. She had successfully gained their interest and continued conversing to them.
You will both need to go to Stalhross. The only thing that can harm the bear is silver. Look for a craftsman named Rundun.
Elric and Reed looked at each other, not knowing whether to trust her or kill her where she stood. Telebach then sombered her face and spoke to Reed.
There is one more thing. You will need to be cursed as well. It will be the only way you can match the bear in strength.
Bjornoff tilted his head, for he was not expecting this. The curse would warp his mind and put bloodlust in his veins. Reed could be a bit fiery at times, but he always kept his head on straight. This would unground his morals and wither his self-control. Elric chimed in on the matter.
I say no. He isn't getting hexed like that fucking beast.
Telebach saw the actual answer in Reed's face. He would do it. If it brought the bear to an end, he would do whatever it took to avenge his wife and daughter. Reed spoke over Elric.
How would you go about cursing me? Just tell me what to do so we can end this.
Thrice scanned his friend, saying,
Little brother, do not become what that thing is.
Telebach interrupted them, answering Reed.
I'll craft a potion for you to drink. Once you consume it, the only way to break your curse is to kill the hexed bear.
She rolled her eyes over to Elric.
It would be wise if you were not around when he did this. There is no telling where his mind will wander to.
Reed then reassured Elric.
I have to do this for Morgana and Fela, and for all of the others that lost loved ones in Alfredheim. She mentioned that she could help you too. Are you with me, old friend?
Thrice looked at the witch and then back to Reed.
I'm with you, but keep your blade at the ready.
Bjornoff then stared at the beautiful witch and told her,
If you betray us, or lead us astray, know that we will come for your head. Understand that we will take pleasure in your death. Make no mistake, you have no power we cannot overcome.
Telebach agreed.
I would expect nothing less from you two. I give you my word that I am here to help, and I vow to leave animal evolution to the will of the gods.
With that, the Norsemen left the woods and began making preparations for their journey to Stalharast. They needed to find a man named Rundin. The witch made it seem as if he would have weapons made of silver, or know how to craft them at least. Elferheim was south of Stalharast. It would take quite a while to get there by foot. The two men did not own horses, as would be the preferred method of travel. Just as they were about to embark on their long voyage north, they ran into a fellow townsman named Zogny. He had raided with the two men before, and also lost his brother the night of the bear attack. Zogny was loading up his cart with his household possessions as Elric and Reed approached him. Elric inquired,
You there, where you headed off to?
Zogny answered,
Going north. I'm not staying around this town, just waiting for that damn bear to return to kill the rest of us. If I were you, I'd do the same.
Reed then spoke up.
Would you mind if we hitched a ride with you? We have urgent business in Stalharast.
The man agreed to give them a ride, and they began helping him load up his belongings. It did not take much time until they were off. Elverheim was left behind them, and their journey to Stalharast was now put into motion by the sounds of circling wheels being pulled by clopping hooves. Reed and Elric took the time to tell the wagoneer that they intended to kill the bear with a silver weapon. They intentionally left out the part about the witch they met in the woods and the cursing of Reed. It seemed like a taboo topic to be conversing about. The journey took about a full day until they reached the gates of Stalharast. Always lively and full of people, this town surely would hold the keys to their success. They parted ways with Zogny and tipped a few coins for his help.
May Odin smile upon you.
Then they proceeded through the busy town, not knowing where to find this crafter named Rundin. The seekers of silver came across a merchant who had war weapons on display. They admired the expert skill they saw in all of the blades he had laid out. Reed stepped up to the booth and asked the man behind the counter.
Good sir, where might I find Rundin's shop?
The arms dealer responded.
Oh, he'll be very hard to find, unless you're in Valhalla.
Elric then quibbed.
Are you saying that this person is dead?
The man shook his head.
Yes, he most certainly is.
Bjornoff looked at Thrice in disbelief. They traveled all the way to this town, only to find out the man they were seeking had passed away. Reed then questioned.
Would you happen to be the blacksmith that made this lovely steel collection here?
The merchant spoke.
I am. Is there something in particular you are looking for?
He thought it to be a shot in the dark, but Reed asked anyway.
Do you sell any weapons made from silver?
The merchant then stood up and leaned over his table. The interested buyers could see his hairless head, and also saw another man lurking in the shadows behind him. The bald man quizzed to Reed.
Did a horse lead you here?
Rather puzzled by the question, Reed responded.
Kind of. More of like 2 horses pulled a cart with us on it here.
Not satisfied with this answer, the dealer exclaimed.
Why are you here then? You've asked about my father, and silver weapons. Oh, seems a bit fishy.
Elric spoke this time.
We had no idea Rundon was your father.
Reed got back on subject.
Look, do you have any silver weapons or not?
The vendor replied again.
Why are you here?
There was some tension growing between these men, and Bjornoff was losing his patience. He got angry with the man, pronouncing,
What does it matter why I'm here? I'm here to do business, damn it!
He slammed his fists on the table for a gesture of exclamation to the stubborn craftsman. This caused the figure in the shadows to quickly rise behind the weapons dealer and draw an arrow, pointing it directly at Reed's eye. Elric calmly put his hand on Reed's shoulder and said,
Let's look elsewhere, brother.
This altercation did not go as planned, and Reed was still pissed off about the odd questioning. As the duo began to leave the merchant's stall, the vendor overheard Reed say to Elric,
How am I going to kill this bear if I can't get a silver blade? I can't explain a cursed beast to a stranger, or how a witch in the woods sent us here.
Wait. Hold on there.
The craftsman called out to them. Elric and Reed turned around to see the man displaying an axe that reflected the rays of the sun across their faces.
You're here to kill a bear, right? But not just any bear.
The blacksmith spoke as he moved the axe around so they could see it in its splendor. Reed then slowly approached.
Yes, a cursed bear murdered my family and ravaged our village. Is this axe made of silver?
The man with the axe spoke to the shadowed person behind him.
Put the damn bow down.
Then returned his face forward to see the gaze that Reed and Elric had on their faces. They were beyond impressed with the level of detail in the weapon.
This axe I call Odrean. It is the only weapon I have that's made of pure silver.
Reed looked at it closer and saw a bear's paw etched into it, an earthly pattern spread across the handle. The axe holder then gently set it on the table and extended his hand.
I am Dual Hoft, and I believe I made this axe for you.
Reed extended his arm out too, and they embraced forearms. Introducing himself, he replied,
My name is Reed Bjornolf. This is my old friend, Elric Thrice. We hail from Elferheim.
They began talking amongst each other as Duel introduced his friend from the shadows.
My friend with the quick draw is named Ganir Magnus. He can get straight to the point.
They laughed as Ganir revealed himself to the group and shook their hands. Duel then lifted Odrean up and handed it over to Reed. The blacksmith was right. This was the axe he would need to slaughter the bear. He had made this weapon for Bjornoff before even meeting him. Hoff spoke to Reed.
It's yours to keep. Conquer whatever it is you need to overcome.
Reed thanked him and asked.
Surely there's a price to be paid.
Duel replied.
If a horse leads you back here, then I'll accept a form of payment for Odrean. Until then, there's no amount of money I would take for that axe, as it was yours this whole time. We both just didn't know it yet.
The day was beginning to come to an end, but before the men left Duelhoff's stand, Elric inquired.
I wonder, would you happen to have a spear back there as well?
Duel smirked as he asked a familiar question again.
And why are you here?
Elric learned to simply answer the man's query with honesty, stating,
I must defeat the perils that lie in the depths of the Fjordlag Sea.
Hoff then ushered for Magnus to grab something that was hidden behind him. Duel then revealed a spear to Elric that unhinged his jaw. It too looked to be crafted for him, and only him.
This spear is Vegamar. It is yours to keep and use for whatever your fate has in store for you.
Duelhoff stated as he handed the spear to Elric, allowing him to look it over and feel its smoothness. Thrice then thanked him by saying,
You are a mighty fine craftsman, Duel. We both appreciate these treasures you've bestowed upon us. The gods have truly been with us on this day.
Reed admired his new weapon.
We do hope to return here to repay you, Duel, but we must be on our way. This axe has a bloody destiny ahead of it, and we still have quite the journey back to Elferheim.
Duel remarked to them.
Nonsense. That'd be a 3 days walk back. Stay here for the night, get some rest. Tomorrow our good friend will take you back to your village.
Without hesitation, Elric responded.
We would appreciate that very much.
Strapping the silver axe to his waist, Reed agreed.
Thank you, brother. Your kindness reminds me that the Azir might still be watching over us.
Duelhoft closed down his shop for the night and led the men to the local inn. The blacksmith spoke to Reed as he offered him a horn of his mead.
Let us not dwell on tomorrow, but let us drink to this moment. Ale!
Bjornhoff sipped the liquid quickly, then told him.
I do believe that whatever happens has already happened. All that is left for me to do is experience it.
Ganea was speaking to the innkeeper and arranging rooms for Elric and Reed for the night. Then Ganea set off to speak to another man in the corner as Thrice, Bjornhoff, and Hoft continued to converse. Elric posed a question.
How did you know to make these weapons precisely for us?
Duel thought for a moment.
That is a story for a different day. There is still too much that I cannot explain with mere words.
Reed then asked.
Were these the only 2 weapons you made with such clarity?
Hoff answered quickly this time.
Certainly not. I made the bow for Gnir called Kaunan, and he answered the same questions you both were asked today. I also crafted my shield named Minhleif. All were forged in the fire of IsleBane.
The men from Elferheim were now even more interested in the question Duel was dodging. They decided not to pry any further, though, remembering not to look a gift horse in the mouth.
It seems our minds have a lot to think on. But again, Duel, we cannot thank you enough for your generosity.
Thrice commented as the bowmen approached the table. Ganea spoke to the group.
Brothers, I have arranged for 2 adjoining rooms. In the morning, our friend Ivor Colborn will be taking you both back to your village. He has business in a southern town anyway. Do not worry about any forms of payment to the innkeeper or to Ivor. Everything has already been taken care of, including a few flagons of ale.
Reed and Elric were quite speechless to hear such news. With gratitude in his voice, Bjornhoff gripped Ganea's forearm.
You both have been the greatest of men we've encountered in a long time. I'm at a loss as to how to thank you, or even repay you.
Duelhoft raised his drink and stated,
Kill that damn bear.
All at once they gulped down their strong beverages. Reed shouted over the group's laughter.
On Woden's eye, I will make sure that hideous bear meets its end.
The hour grew late. Duel and Ganea took their leave after introducing them to Ivor and showing the men to their rooms. Before taking off to their bedchambers, Reed mentioned to Elric.
Tomorrow we will see what this life has in store for us, for today has given us all that we ever needed to be victorious.
Thrice smiled and remarked,
Little brother, this was only an indication for what the gods have to offer us. Now try to get some sleep.
They both sank into their rooms and drifted off into a deep slumber. The morning came quicker than they would have thought. The good drink from the previous night had put them into a great sleep, and they both felt fully rejuvenated. Colborn was getting the horse carriage ready just outside of the inn. Elric and Reed got their gear together and headed out the door, greeting Ivor as they loaded themselves onto his wagon. The ride was rather smooth for the first few hours. Light conversation about how Ivor was associated with Duel and Ganea was made. The driver told them,
I got to know the Hooves through the trade business in Stalharas, but I only recently met Ganir.
Thrice looked at Reed as he spoke.
They do seem to work well together. A good team.
Bjornhoff agreed with the statement by adding,
Mighty fine work we saw at the shop, but greater pieces than that is what he put in our hands.
The warriors from Elferheim looked over Vegamar and Odrean after Reed spoke his words.
Hard workers, those 2.
Ivor stated to them as he jostled the reins in his hands. The carriage came to a stop as the sun began to set. They were still half a day out from their destination, but decided to make camp for the night rather than drive blindly. Colborn set a fireplace up whilst Reed and Elric gathered provisions for the night. They had come prepared for a gentle stay, bringing salted meats and apples with them. They set out a skin of meat to enjoy with their food, as Ivor let the horses nibble off a few apples. The night began to set in, as the moon was but a sliver from being completely black. The 3 men made their bedding for the night and among the chatter of insects drifted off to sleep. Elric and Iva slept without a sound, but Reed had a terrible nightmare crawl into his dream state. The hazy edges of his mind encircled images of his beloved wife and daughter. They were trapped in a wooden box, and no matter how hard he swung his axe at the lock, he was never strong enough to break them free. The dream shifted to him drifting in a small boat down a river of bones and skulls. He swept his oar into the human remains that were lying beneath him, pushing himself forward at a greater pace. The more he rowed the oar, the quicker and quicker he went on this river of death. Continuously he rowed, until the stream's edges were a blur and he became nauseous at the speed his mind was taking him. Reed jumped out of his dream boat and into the bones, and as he did so, the landscape changed again. Standing above him was the body of a woman with the head of a goat's skull. Bjornoff felt ice melting underneath his skin. His emotions became fearful, and he searched for his weapon, only to discover he was naked and defenseless. The woman dripped blood on his forehead and then said to him,
"I pity none, and I shall spare only those I pity."
Reed reached his hand out to grasp her, but as he did so, she vanished and the ice underneath him collapsed. The endless free fall he felt finally woke him up. With his hair and blankets drenched with nervous sweat, Reed's eyes blinked open. He had a heavy rhythm to his breathing, and quickly tried to remind himself that it was only a dream. Bjornoff then took a pull from the wineskin laying close by, and returned his head back to his makeshift bed. Eventually drifting off, he slept without another dream haunting him for the night. With the blood-orange sun rising, the trio woke from their rest. Quick to the punch, Iva had his horses tethered to the wagon and ready to carry them back to Elfaheim. The two homesteaders made haste upon waking and prepared for the breaking of a beast's curse. The horses pulled the wagon at a greater speed than the day prior. Even they could sense the urgency in the air. It was slightly past midday when the group got in view of the town. Quickly, after seeing Elfaheim in the distance for the first time, a villager was running in their direction in sheer terror. Elric stood up and yelled,
"Hold on! Iva, stop the wagon!"
He jumped off and ran to the man. Reed followed behind in a scuffle.
Flutip, is that you? What happened?
The villager had wide eyes and a horrified face. His lips quivered as he spat out words.
The bear attacked again. It ate my child. I watched that monster eat my baby boy.
The man brought his hands up over his eyes as he spoke.
I must leave. We all must leave. Elfraheim is cursed. It's cursed, I say.
Flutip hurriedly continued barefoot along the path. Bjornoff and Elric looked at one another as Reed said,
"Let's go find that witch Televok."
Thrice nodded in agreement, and then turned his head to Iva.
We thank you, good sir. Please give our best to the blacksmith. We'll carry on our own from here.
The wagon owner called back with a wave.
I'll be in Baltermoss Village until the next full moon. If either of you need help, don't hesitate to call upon me. May the divines be with you.
They took off through the woods after the farewell to Ivar Colborne. Dashing between trees and leaping over obstacles, they made their route quick and swift. It did not take them long to find the willow tree they had come across before. Televok was not in sight, though.
Where is she? Witch, show yourself!
Bjornoff exclaimed, his voice echoing off the trees. In a similar fashion as their first encounter, she manifested herself behind them.
You are late,
She said to the men as she pulled a vial out from between her breasts.
There's no time to lose. We heard the bear attacked again.
Thrice spoke as the witch began to hand the small potion to Reed.
This is it. Take it right before you enter the cave, and best make sure Elric is not there.
The red-haired man only shook his head in agreement. There were too many thoughts circling in his head for him to speak. Then the witch turned towards Thrice and noticed his spear. She muttered to him as well.
If he succeeds tonight, then you must come see me tomorrow. Alone.
Elric responded to her.
He will succeed tonight. And if there be no tricks, I will pay you a visit.
She stepped away from the Northmen, bowing her head to them.
I do regret what has happened to your village. I promise you on my life that something interfered with my spell. When I find out who or what, I will inform you.
They accepted her apology. It was obvious to the two men that they could see her attempts to right the wrong that was done.
What could have the power to alter this witch's magic, though?
Elric thought to himself.
Well, I suppose now. There is no time to waste.
They left Telebach in the woods and began walking towards the hiding place of the cursed bear. The men came just short of the cave. Elric remarked to Reed,
Since we're not sure how clearly you'll be thinking under the witch's brew, I need you to repeat after me.
He grabbed his friend by the shoulders and looked him directly in his eyes.
Into the cave. Kill the bear.
Reed echoed Elric with pure conviction.
Into the cave. Kill the bear.
Louder they grew in unison, chanting the words together. Their voices met the peak to their climbing crescendo, and then a hush fell over them. Reed nodded and broke the silence.
Thank you for all you've done, my old friend.
They embraced forearms, and thrice left without looking back. Bjornhoff stood with Odrein in his right hand, the cursed elixir in his left. As the footsteps of his comrade faded into the distance behind him, he knew it was now time. He put the cork of the potion in his mouth and bit down, pulling it free from the small bottle. Spitting out the topper, he then chugged the contents in the flask. The taste was sweet and delicious at first, but as he finished the potion, it grew bitter and putrid on his tongue. He almost vomited as the concoction slid down his gullet and into his belly. He threw the empty container out of sight and heard it crash into shards off in the distance. Reed then got a hold of himself and repeated Elric's phrase in his mind a few times.
Into the cave, kill the bear. Into the cave, kill the bear. Into the cave.
He looked over to his left arm and saw his veins begin to swell. Their normal bluish tint began to fade to a purple, and then a blackness crawled up his arms that spawned from his chest. His breathing got heavy, and the man's sight blurred with a brightness. With half of his mind still intact, he began walking towards the mouth of the cave, dragging Odrein's blade on the ground behind him. The murderous anger began to set in, and his body took on a painful transformation. His muscles grew almost twice in size, not just his chest and arms, but his feet, legs, torso, neck, and head all gained mass. He shrieked in pain outside of the cave, finally dropping the silver axe needed for his mission. He then yelled like a wild animal, stretching his arms out with clenched fists. His burliness began to tear apart his clothing. The transforming man's eyes darted open, with an aura of light surrounding them, and his vision brightened, allowing him to see through the darkness. Reed then spoke to himself, as his mind began to twist in the phrase of insanity.
I like this body.
His voice had two tones now, a deep lower cadence shadowed under his words. Reed picked up the axe and looked at it, not seeing its beauty anymore, only its function. His duotoned voice made another proclamation.
Odrein, let us see our own blood.
He put the axe to his face and split open his cheek along the sharp edge. He chuckled as he watched black blood drip off his blade and onto the earth below. This laugh began to overtake him, and it grew both in volume and lunacy. Something triggered his human mind for a split second, and he snapped out of his delusion. He said the phrase out loud.
Into the cave. Kill the bear.
It was a brief moment of sanity, but it was enough for him to walk into the cave. His cursed brain took back control, and he looked at his body as it held the axe. The bellowing voice was heard again from the hexed Northman.
Odrein, show our wrath.
As he said this, he slammed the axe down into the ground. It cracked the earth and created a rift that continued to split in front of him. The fractured crevasse worked its way up the wall and finally stopped at the peak of the stalactite. It split in half and dropped itself on top of Reed. The sharp calcium spikes should have punctured and ripped through his skin, but they had no effect on the cursed man. He brushed it off like dust on his shoulder. The commotion in the cave woke the sleeping bear. It snarled as it made its way to the cause of these destructive sounds. Both cursed beings came to a meeting as they rounded a corner. It stood infinitely taller than the man, but fear was something he had forgotten about during his psychotic transmogrification. The bear growled at him. The man roared back. It was quite clear between these two beasts that only one of them would be leaving this cave alive. Reed's demonic voice shouted again.
Audrey, today is not the day we die.
His words echoed off the cave walls, ending in a deep chasm far away from where the two monsters were about to face off. The bear swiped at the man, but this was no match for what Reed Bjornoff had become now. Its paw got sliced by the silver axe and almost completely lopped off. It squealed in pain for the first time since it had been cursed. Audreyan was wielded for a second time. The power behind its swing split the creature's leg open. Then Reed kicked at its chest and sent the bear flying backwards. It scuffled back to its bloodied feet and then ran towards the man. The beast lunged at his neck and tried to bite down. Reed dropped Audreyan and caught the mouth with both hands and stared at the animal's teeth. It continued to snarl as the Norseman toyed with it. With a massive torque from his thickened hands, Reed broke the lower jawbone of the animal. A loud crack resonated off the cavern walls and the mouth fell slack as tendons were torn asunder. Reed sank his own teeth into the wild creature, biting into its snout with barbaric savagery. His 5 fingers gripped around its throat as he threw it up against the wall and began punching it in the face. Bjornoff was asserting his dominance over the animal as he swept the legs out from under it, tackling the bear to the ground. He grabbed the silver axe as the bear laid on its side helpless. He raised the weapon over the beast and shouted,
Audrey, we are death.
Bjornoff brought the blade down on the bear's crown. Not once, not twice, but countless times. He laughed maniacally towards the end, watching himself mutilate the corpse. The deed was done, with zero discretion and respect. He then began to drag the carcass out of the cave, just as the curse started to work itself out of his bloodstream. As promised by the witch, the hex on him was broken after he had killed the bear. Reed's body began to shrink back to its usual size. His normal thoughts slowly came back into his mind. Sadly, he remembered everything that had just transpired. Then memories of his wife and daughter ran back over his train of thought. This brought him to his knees just outside of the entrance, as his life felt as empty as the cave was now. Reed began to weep.
What will you live for now?
His anguish pleaded. A steady rhythm of muffled thuds were heard from behind him. He rose his head and, wiping his face, turned to behold a silver steed. It had a viridescent glow about it that ran through its eyes, mane, and tail. A silver metallic body, the horse was more than Reed had ever seen. It galloped near and stepped close to the distraught man. As it moved closer, Reed caught sight of its hair that was made of thick and twisted verdurous vines. It raised its meaty hoof, and in the soil, plain as day, Reed saw runes laid out in its hoof prints. The translation from the muddy engravement.
Man will evolve in chaos.
The horse then looked at him with direct eye contact, as if to answer his anguished plea. Reed was uncertain and still emotional, but felt at ease in the steed's presence. His mind went to work on deciphering the definition of the phrase. Finally, he clapped his bloody hands together, stood up, and nodded to the horse, acknowledging that he understood the meaning of the runes. The stallion approved of Reed's new understanding with a snort, and disappeared into the deep forest. Its trail of hoofprints were then devoured by the grass and mud, as if the forest knew to cover its tracks. After the cataclysmic battle that broke the cruel and savage curse, the victor was from that day forward known as Reed Bjornoff, the Red Bear.